name is Kate Brady. I'm the Immigration Department Head at the Constitutional Law Center for Muslims in America. And I'm so excited that you're joining me for this webinar on the COVID-19 travel restrictions. I'm going to take a little time to walk you through some of the presidential proclamations that have come out in the last few months, and then give you a little bit more of a peek behind the curtain at our organization and what we do. So let's get started. There was a presidential proclamation that came out very recently, and it went into effect on Thursday, April 23rd. This proclamation was very specific in the target, which was immigrants, green card holders, or sometimes what we call lawful permanent residents. And it was purported to limit them in the way that would protect U.S. workers, a little bit less than the broad-based tweet that had come out earlier that week that said it was going to suspend all immigration. But this one actually suspends entry of an individual seeking to enter the United States, so maybe obvious, but is outside of the United States currently, who does not have a valid immigrant visa, valid travel document, such as a transportation letter, boarding foil, or advanced parole document. So that means that there's really a limited application, but it is going to affect a lot of people. Those individuals would be spouses and children of lawful permanent residents, parents, adult children and siblings of U.S. citizens, and applicants for the diversity visa lottery. One thing that I would also point out is that we recently found out that they are giving a little bit of a 30-day delay in diversity visa interviews for the upcoming year. So that may be something if you were looking for somebody to come into the United States on the diversity visa who already was selected last year, they may be delayed slightly. So when I say that there was a few people that this applied to, there was a lot more people that it exempted. And the one that I have here that maybe is the most obvious is people who are lawful permanent residents already. They either have their green card or they have maybe their refuge or their travel document, and they're able to come back into the United States already as lawful permanent residents. And then they gave a lot of other broad exceptions. So the one that I think is the most relevant right now to the industry as far as COVID is that they are allowing people to come in who are healthcare workers like doctors or nurses or people in research. Those are not part of the immigrants who are going to be stopped. Also, immigrant investors, spouses and children of United States citizens, people who are helping law enforcement. And I think the one at the end here is very important, is it's not stopping asylum and refugee seekers who are coming in for immigrant purposes. So this was not the only proclamation, but it is the most recent. So it's the one I wanted to start with because it might be the one on most people's mind. There were 3 other proclamations that happened between January and March. And these were for people who had traveled, who are non-citizens, and they'd traveled through China, Iran, or certain European countries called the Schengen region, which are these countries. And I think that part of the proclamation made a lot of sense because these were all areas where there were some pretty severe outbreaks of COVID, and we would want to limit the amount of people who were traveling to the United States. And in the Schengen region, I think, you've heard Italy and Germany and Spain and even France that have had some pretty severe outbreaks that are maybe just now starting to dissipate, or at least get under control. Again, there were some more proclamations that came out, even about United States citizens. They had to also address the fact that sometimes United States citizens, lawful permanent residents, and their family would travel through these countries and return home. These individuals were required to only go through 13 designated U.S. airports. And what that meant was that there was going to be a lot of congestion at those airports for that time when people were coming in right after having traveled. And it wasn't very well rolled out. There was a lot of congestion within those airports immediately following the announcement. And it was a little bit, I think, frustrating and maybe even frightening for people who would go to these airports having not traveled to those countries and be packed in with many, many people who had. Once arriving, there's an enhanced screening through the CDC process and also a self-quarantine once they reach their final destination, because as any of us know who have traveled internationally, you can travel through an international airport, clear customs, clear the CBP or immigration process, and then continue flying on. So those airports here, as you can see, are probably some of the busiest airports in the United States. I know we saw a lot of congestion at Chicago O'Hare that first weekend, and also here in Dallas, we had a lot of people who had arrived without much preparation for the airport to handle that. Again, they didn't just deal with travel by air, they also closed by another proclamation the land ports, both the northern and the southern border. This meant that any non-essential travel was now impermissible for people coming into the United States across the border, driving, and sometimes there's even people who are able to maybe come by foot across those land bridges, and they were going to be stopped unless they were essential workers who were coming here for essential reasons, maybe people who worked in healthcare or maybe in the food chain, something like that. So this was a policy that was for 30 days and it has been renewed. So we have a couple more weeks about that. I think one of the things that is a little bit hard to hear about this one is it also meant that those people who were at the southern border who have been in a situation where they're trying to come in and seek asylum were now also paused for that amount of time. Now at the same time, they also suspended all routine visa services globally at all of the US embassies and consulates, canceled all the appointments that were already scheduled, both immigrant and non-immigrant. So even if people had been preparing for their interview and were ready to come to the United States, this means that they now have to wait until the US reopens our consulates and all of those get rescheduled. And so you can imagine the chaos that that's going to create. They did keep their emergency and mission critical services available, as well as our US citizen services. And it did not affect the visa waiver program, which is for countries that are traveling to the United States and have been designated to be able to come for 90 days without a visa, many of which are in that Schengen region, which now those people are already suspended, but people who are in other areas of the visa waiver program were not affected. So countries that were maybe places like South Korea, which you would have assumed would have been part of this, it is also part of the visa waiver program, but it has not been suspended. So this was a 30-day proclamation as well. It was not extended, but it was pretty much superseded by the proclamation that went into effect on April 23rd. It had a similar effect. And the interesting thing for me is I think this has really meant that policies that the administration has been trying to get through legislatively have now been done through this process of proclamations and probably advanced their agenda a lot when they could not do that through Congress. I want to talk now a little bit about our organization at the Constitutional Law Center for Muslims in America. We also refer to ourselves by the acronym of CLCMA. I'm in the immigration department, and when you think of immigration, there's a lot of different general immigration matters that are out there in the public. There's citizenship and lawful permanent residence, maybe people who are coming in as a tourist and want help, or F1 students, specialty occupation visas, or investors. Those are what we consider general immigration. What we do here at CLCMA is what we consider impact litigation. So in the federal courts, we are suing generally the US government, and we are doing that in the immigration context for people who have struggled to get the benefit that they are entitled to through the regular administrative process. So immigration, in all of those areas, it's very broad, but it's also very complex. Immigration litigation lays on top of that the federal court system and how to sue the government and to get what we need from those agencies. But we also need to understand what immigration is in order to be effective and specific when we're in those cases. And we are a very small subset of practitioners because most immigration attorneys do not litigate. They do what I would consider a petition-based practice, or maybe they help people who are in deportation court, but they do not litigate in the federal court. Immigration court is a separate administrative court. And it is something that we understand is very time intensive. And so what I also want you to understand is that we do have the numbers that we are able to take. We get hundreds of inquiries through all the areas that we have. We have immigration, we have civil litigation, we have criminal, and we also have a group that does nonprofit seminars to help people who are maybe trying to be in better compliance with what they need to do to maintain their nonprofit status. And in all of those cases, We're going to take in the information that you will submit to us over our website, do a consultation, make recommendations internally. If you meet our criteria, you'll be selected for being asked if the board would like to approve your case. And then if you are selected by the board, you'll become one of our impact litigation cases. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about what our subject matter is in that impact litigation. So we fight against discrimination and injustice by the US government in our cases that are in the area of rights that have been violated on the basis of race, religion, or country of origin. And many times we focus on national security. You may have heard some of the litigation that's out there that is challenging the program, that is delaying and denying cases under the acronym CARP. And a lot of our immigration cases have that component. We can't accept very many cases out of the hundreds that we do, but when we do accept your case, we want to accept cases that we can represent and that will help a lot of people in the community. Because one good decision in federal court can then be used for other cases to enforce that with the government agencies to do their job that will be without discrimination and without violating people's civil rights. Cases are very interesting when people come and they are just wondering whether or not they can do this on their own. Is it just filling out forms? They know lots of people who did it without an attorney. They think it costs too much, and they think it's just really simple until it's not. And that's where I would like to tell you, as a general immigration attorney for over 12 years, I saw many of those cases that people thought were very simple. And now here at CLCMA, I can tell you that there are facts and circumstances that the United States government sometimes takes against cases that make it anything but simple. And so I would really recommend that if we can't take your case, you would at least try to find a good attorney that you could work with. And what I do after I talk to you is every case of mine gets resources to find that attorney and to do your own due diligence. And the resources that I have here are the ones that I would typically email to somebody, and they can be very specific to your location, and you can have an attorney that will represent you and that you can feel comfortable with. If we are not the right organization for you because you do not have one of those impact litigation cases. But I'd really like to thank you for coming here today and listening to this webinar. Again, my name is Kate Brady. I'm the Immigration Department Head for the Constitutional Law Center for Muslims in America. And if you'd like to know more about us, you can go to our website, which is www.clcma.org. And if you think you have a case that might be one that is being discriminated against in the areas that I talked about, please do fill out an inquiry, and we look forward to speaking to you. Thank you.